Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my New Jersey neighbor, Mike Towers, who is the CISO for Allergan. How are you doing, Mike?
Good. How you doing, Ed?
Welcome to New York.
Thank you.
So you've been with the company a few years.
Yep, a little over
pharma?
four. Correct.
Pharma?
I've been in pharma for about 25 years.
Keeping it nice and safe from all those hackers going after
doing our
drug
best.
companies?
Yes, indeed.
It's gotten to be a lot of work these days, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Hey, tell me, in the pharma industry, the threat. I'm guessing most people watching would immediately jump to IP.
Correct.
I know that's important, but give us an understanding when you think about threat in pharma. What are the big issues?
There is obviously an intellectual property protection element, which has always been in pharma. But I think one of the changes recently has been there's a lot more partnerships, a lot more collaborative R&D. So working with biotechs, small universities, et cetera. So that makes the IP protection area a little bit more challenging than, say, it was 10, 15 years ago, where most pharmas did it in-house. And then you have to extend into, so after you find and develop the new products, you have to make them. So there's the manufacturing and supply chain element of it, which if doctors and prescribers are used to dealing with your products and prescribing them, one of the first things that will change their mind is if it's not available. So if there's a supply chain issue or even a quality recall issue, so that's an important element of it as well. And then I would say lastly, in a generic sense, there's the company and brand reputational element, so making sure that you protect some of the back end systems that deal with experience management or how to get treatments and all that, and make sure that people are comfortable with your products, especially for the pharmaceutical products that some people can choose to use rather than having it prescribed to them.
Yeah. Do these tend to be nation-sponsored attacks going after a big pharma? You guys do Botox.
Correct.
You guys are a very, very successful firm. Is it kind of like that? Is it a nation-sponsored? Who's doing it?
There are certainly elements of nation-sponsored attacks, mostly in the IP space and sometimes in the manufacturing know-how space. The reputational stuff, frankly, isn't as much nation-state sponsored. That could be more hacktivism or potentially even cyber criminals if they're looking for patient data or rewards data for things like how often people use our products. But the nation-state element does impact the IP and the manufacturing know-how.
Is there some anti-Botox group somewhere that?
Not that we're aware of, but it is interesting to see how many times it's mentioned in dramas and TV shows. And there was actually a Verizon commercial that mentioned it when the video was out of tune. So she joked that she had a bad Botox treatment. But so there's always some sort of mentions. It's becoming like Kleenex, Coke, and Xerox. You can't get away from it from a brand perspective.
As you do your architecture and security protections, for the firm, you guys tend to have a conventional architecture, like do pharmas in general have something that, for example, might look similar to a bank? Or are there some very specific things that you do in the pharmaceutical industry that would be unique?
Yeah, I would think two areas where I say that we're unique. One is because a lot of our early stage drug discovery and a lot of our scientists obviously trying to find new medicines and new ways to keep people healthy, they're doctors. And doctors traditionally don't take security controls as well as, say, working for a bank or even a utility does. They often come from academia. They're very collaborative. So the expectation of open collaboration in the pharma space is there.
They don't just listen to people like you and me?
No, it's a little bit of a, sometimes they get a little, some of them are more willing, especially if they have teenage children. But sometimes, especially if they come from academia, that's a challenge. So making sure that we don't encumber their work, but also make sure they have the right controls is a big area. And I would say the other thing that's relatively unique with pharma is like I said before, the manufacturing process. Most pharmaceutical companies, especially the bigger ones, the best way you could secure, one of the best ways you could secure is to standardize. And it's difficult to standardize in the manufacturing area of a pharmaceutical product when you're making pills, you're making liquids, you're making biologics that are injected, you're making creams. The manufacturing processes are all very, very unique. So it's the more variability you have, the tougher it is to secure. So I think that's unique as well.
I'll be darned. Now, in your industry, you guys have started to work together, like in sharing initiatives and building a community.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So like many industries, there is an ISAC. The Financial Services ISAC is the most mature, but the National Health ISAC, the NHISAC, is right on its heels. It's a very passionate group. I think I could safely say that a lot of ISACs share because they feel like they have to. We share because we want to. We have a collective understanding that we can't protect ourselves alone. We need the community. The NHISAC has grown from 85 members a year and a half ago to over 300.
Wow.
It's meteoric growth. Our conferences and summits have gone from 7,500 people to over 600 the last time.
Wow.
So the sharing is definitely important, especially when you think about the variability within the healthcare sector. So the government defines healthcare as hospitals, pharmas, medical devices, and insurance. 4 very, very different businesses. And we all think about it in our personal lives, if someone close to us is in the hospital getting medical treatment, that's where potentially an attack or a ransomware attack could have the most impact. But the corollary is that they don't have nearly the investment as a massive pharma or a big insurance company would. So that collaboration and partnership is very important so that the companies that do have the resource and experience can help the lower end of the industry.
Is there any active sort of machine-to-machine sharing? Is it more human, like social kind of interaction?
There's both, actually. So we've built a backbone for sharing. We've used a number of technologies to do that, whether it's connecting individual company SIMs or just having automated email pushes for new indicators of compromise. All that's in place. And then we actually have evolved to the next generation, I would say, where there's a lot of open collaboration, email lists, so somewhat informal. And I'm proud to say, being one of the original investors in it, is that the NHISAC, I think, has gone to the 3rd level of innovation, where we're actually starting to build services for the industry as a whole. So we partner with some companies, almost an integration partner as an NHISAC, to help, say, a low-end hospital or medical practice get MSS services or get third-party oversight services, something that, frankly, none of them would build on their own because they can't have the starting investment. So our services are actually being used as well.
So hospitals would be part of the same ISAC?
Correct.
That's interesting because
Correct.
you got a whole plethora of different suppliers and
Right.
consumers and producers all jumbled together. How does that work out?
Well, and you think about it, what I mentioned before about the reputational risk that a lot of pharmas have. A lot of the public would view healthcare in general. So if they hear about a hack or a breach at a hospital or a ransomware attack at a hospital, some of them may group that to another healthcare issue. We all, I think, know how emotive and how sociologically controversial healthcare costs are, so it's all linked together. So it's very important for us to help each other to make sure that protection's in place. And let's face it, for whatever reason, hospital networks don't have the investment in security that, say, a pharma or an insurance company will. So their openness and willingness to come and ask for the help and our willingness to give it has been very important in helping them too. I mean, your Johns Hopkins, your Cleveland Clinics, your Mayo Clinics, all of your very, very popular and well-known names, we've all worked very closely with them to help them protect their systems.
Yeah. Do you think things are getting better in terms of threat, or do you think they're getting worse?
I think they're getting worse from a variability perspective. I think the
unpredictability.
Correct, and the difference in the attack mechanisms. Obviously, social engineering becomes more of a challenge as the younger generation, younger workforce enter into leadership positions. More of their lives are in the open. They're on LinkedIn. They're on Facebook. There's a lot more information that can be gathered about them to initiate a social engineering attack. And I think the global element of the industry as a whole is another factor that, especially for the big companies who are doing business in so many countries, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and depending on where you are in the world, that could be a way into to anywhere in the company, as the NotPetya attack proved with most of the people that were impacted. It started in the Ukraine. So depending on where you operate, that's another element. So I would say the variability and the global nature of the attacks are 2 of the biggest areas that I think make it worse.
What can we do? Those are different than, like, if we were sitting here 15 years ago, we'd be talking about web protocols and apps and software. These are different.
Yeah, and I think that what it calls to question, and in fact an interesting area that my fellow CISOs and I are discussing, is that especially the medium to large companies who have been under cost pressure, they've been trying so hard the last 5-10 years to consolidate, rationalize, standardize, connect the company, have one networking group that can run the whole company, one server infrastructure group that can run the whole company. But the more you bring together and the more you consolidate the organizations, the more likely you are to have widespread impact. You basically have just widened the blast radius if you have an attack. So what I think we're going to see the pendulum shift back to is connectedness while segregated, so that you can have more modular networks and more modular setups, so that if there is an issue or an attack in a certain part of the world or a certain business unit, that doesn't bleed into the other ones as easily as it would today.
That's a pretty advanced concept, connected and segregated. I think you've been thinking about this a little bit.
And you think about all the major players that we all work with on a day-to-day basis technologically, Cisco, Microsoft, to name 2. Their inherent value proposition for the last 10 years has been bringing companies together. So a lot of it is just making sure that there's somewhat of the advantages of, I think we've all heard from our CIO, when I travel to the Eastern Europe, or I travel to Asia. I want to be able to connect back to my apps in the States or to connect to my apps in Western Europe. Well, a connected network allows that to happen. So, but at the same time, there has to be some level of isolation and segregation so that we can manage it.
Dude, you have a pretty good understanding of this stuff.
Yeah, it's been like I said, a lot of it is great dialogue with peers, and we're all shared in the same challenge. So it's been, I believe that whole sharing is one of my top assets to doing my job.
Well, I hope you keep doing the good work you're doing.
Yep.
Protecting our pharmaceutical industry from cyber attacks.
Keeps
Keeping us all nice and safe.
Keeps me up at night, so I'll keep at it.
Safe to beautify ourselves with Botox.
Absolutely.
Dude, that's awesome. Thanks
Great.
for stopping by. Really
Thank you.
enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. And we will see you next time.